restarted the recording in case. But I see, let me see if I requested that you unmuted. So let's see if that works.
Okay, can y'all hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Hi,
Okay.
hi, Jay. I'm so glad you were able to join us again today.
Sure. And I would turn my camera on if I could only figure out how, but my screen is.
Okay.
Acting up.
Okay.
Oh,
There you
hi.
are.
Hi.
I just had one question. I think I'm still confused about the triggering events. That would be triggering events would be times when a landowner would have to certify compliance with the impervious cover restrictions, but it's not a prerequisite to a finding of non-compliance. So, a triggering event isn't necessary because someone could incrementally increase their impervious cover and then they would be subject to enforcement. Is that correct? You were mentioning, I'm not being clear. You were mentioning certain things that would have to happen that would meet these triggering events. A certain amount of impervious cover being added over a certain amount of time. But what if somebody just incrementally adds impervious cover? They could still be out of compliance, correct?
So, Lori, I think I don't know if it exists in the residential side, but I know in the non-residential side, you said it was that 24-month period.
Mhm.
Is that
Yeah.
also applicable to residential?
It's not in the definition, but that's a good point, and maybe we can add it. We basically we were trying to use the same language that's in other parts of our code, like the landscape ordinance. That same applicability applies for landscaping. Um, but that's a good point, and maybe that's something that we need to add as the time frame. I don't know.
Well, it just seems like it should apply no matter what. If somebody adds 200 feet of paving every year, then eventually they're going to have 100% coverage. I don't know why you'd have to have that activity occur in a certain amount of time in order for the city to find the landowner out of compliance. That doesn't make sense to me.
I I I'm thinking, and Sarah, maybe you can help me. I'm thinking for a commercial or non-residential development, you have phasing. You have phasing. You have much larger properties that do phase development. Is that fair to say, Sarah? Is
Oh,
that
yeah, that happens a lot in non-residential phasing of projects. But yeah, I think you bring up a great point, and we could definitely look into that and take a look at it. I think the hardest thing for residential right now is that when a lot is under 2 acres and there's a single family, I think even duplex use on it, they're not required to get a paving or grading permit. So that's gonna be probably our hardest like process hurdle to get over, is to try to prevent people from making that investment of adding all the paving and spending all that money on the contractor and everything, trying to prevent them from wasting their money when they can't do it anyway, or
Yeah,
we
it
don't want
seems.
them to do it.
Yeah, I would just say like a boat to have the permitting check there, so a required certification of compliance at that trigger point.
Right.
But even if, but if um, they initiate, additional coverage at a later time, and that coverage doesn't meet a trigger point, then you've still got a problem with stormwater and heat island. And
Yeah.
that's kind of, what I see where people, like right now, there's some sort of certification at the time of building permits happen. But then later on, folks come through and they add in pools or driveways or whatever, and their contractor paves over 70 to 90% of the lot. And under your current, I don't know exactly what your trigger points are now, but I'd say you really have to make sure that I would say not only that it's not easy to get around trigger points, but that trigger points aren't required.
Mhm. Right. And I think right now for landscaping, single family and duplex, They don't really have a trigger. It's basically just new construction is like the only time that the arborist looks at landscaping requirements, which kind of is how our code currently works. It's, you know, impervious coverage is only limited as a inverse reaction to how much landscape is required. And so I think just starting a process where there is a standard to calculate impervious coverage maximum is a really good starting point, and we'll probably have to adjust it, as it's implemented, and we have more examples of things that worked and didn't work, after the first round is approved. Is what I would expect to probably be happy with. Of course, we want to get it all right the first time, but so we're working on it. And thank you for those thoughts, because it would be good, something to think about.
Sarah, I don't know if a checklist helps if there's, I mean, because we'd still have to, to have them check those elements, but if they're still not needing a permit, that's kind of where our
Yeah, yeah,
issue is.
yeah. We just gotta, work on outreach and getting with development services and making sure they don't say, no, we don't have any standards for that anymore. Like once it's finally adopted, if it's adopted. So yes. So thank you for all that. Am I missing any other hands?
Yeah, Shayna.
Okay. Do I need to? Okay, good.
Hi.
There you are. Hi.
Hello.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Here. Request sent. Maybe that was. There you go. Yeah, that was probably my fault.
I know we only have like a few minutes left and I have to, but I mean, I would go farther. I feel like you are looking at a microcosm of a bigger problem. And that, looking at the first 25 feet of residential, I mean, I live in an old neighborhood that is being redeveloped and they are just decimating. I mean, like every time they go in for, I'm guessing a building permit, they don't even accurately report like the lot sizes from what I'm seeing, because they cover way more than, whatever the 40%. So, I mean, yes, that's great. And, like the one maybe thing I might have is a ribbon driveway, but like just, what you see downstream is the effect of all of these building permits that are granted, so even with like that's why I was asking what the triggers were. But yeah, so I'm like, oh my gosh, just go farther. This is a huge problem downstream. And I mean, we are upstream of a lot of people. So anyway, I applaud you for, looking at this, from how can we make these baby steps. But I mean, I think also what Jay said is people try and get away with as much as they can. And even if they don't know that they're doing this, by incrementally, I feel like builders know exactly what they're doing when they're going in for these residential permits and are, fudging the numbers as much as they can to already overdevelop. I mean, I'm seeing, the giant, C-shaped house with the pool in the middle, and there's very little landscaping. I mean, there's nowhere for them to go, and that would be great. Some of them did some rain barrels or cisterns, but it's not what I'm seeing. And I mean, we are seeing the effects of the erosion downstream and in the streets and the potholes, and I could go on and on. Anyway,
Oh,
but
yes.
so yay for you guys.
Yeah. And one other thing, I don't think we had the time to mention, but Lori's also proposing that if there's a neighborhood stabilization overlay, that impervious surfaces can be one of the items that they regulate. So it could be that you have particular neighborhoods that have a different character that might want more restrictions or maybe even less restrictions, who knows? But I think that's one neat thing that could help, specific neighborhoods that might have some different conditions and characteristics going on.
I mean, even when I saw one of the Elmwood Thicket, their redevelopment of, just, while zoning may allow you this kind of coverage, this is what traditionally is here with the setbacks being farther than a 25-foot front yard, farther the backyard being much larger. And, the redevelopment they're seeing is just so much bigger than, and yeah, anyway, so no, it's everywhere.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll stay tuned. I'm sure, we're not quite done with the standards just yet.
Right. I would just say, for as far as residential, our reasoning for looking at the front yards were several different things. One, that's where you have, usually that's your greatest setback. Sometimes, it's greater than your side setbacks, your rear setbacks. It's typically where you're going to have, not always, but you're going to have your impervious surfaces like your driveways. But you also have opportunity to have a large lawn area. So, it's eyes on the streets as well, as far as what we can see, and you're seeing that it's very easy to see, what's pervious or what's impervious. So, and then some of our plans, like the Complete Streets Design Manual, that there is a goal in there to reduce impervious surfaces in the front yards. And and we also want to take we want it to be effective, but we don't want overreach. We recognize that people, we want them to be able to utilize their property, their backyards, and kind of the way they see fit, to fit their needs. So there's just a lot of different elements that we've looked at to come up with in the front yard for residential. And then of course a lot of our other cities, we looked at like 23 other cities, and many of the other cities really only control the impervious coverage in the front yard. I want to say Baltimore was the only city that looked at maybe the front and the rear yard for row houses. But other than that, the ones that have regulations, and a lot of them do now, of course, they look at the front yards. So.
And one last question from Adam Murphy. He asked, does this impact PDs like PD 193? Can we take that, or you got it?
I can. It will not, unless the particular plan development refers to the base development code. If has specific regulations, like a lot of our conservation districts actually have impervious coverage in the conservation district. I know Kessler Park and several of the other ones have their own. So this will not regulate that. They'll have their own,
Right.
and except where it's silent, where it doesn't,
Yeah.
but so no, it for the most part, it won't affect the PDs, like I said, unless there's new development and it refers, everything over to
Yeah.
the development code.
So I'll reiterate what you said. You didn't say anything wrong. But the way I like to explain it is that PDs and conservation districts say that if there's a conflict between the text of the ordinance and some other regulation, then the PD, the conservation district, controls. So if a conservation district says your maximum impervious coverage is X, then it's whatever that conservation district or PD says. Now, for the most part, since this is a new standard and it's going to live basically inside of our zoning districts, much like lot coverage does, it'll be right around where lot coverage is situated in 51A and 51. Then if the PD is silent on impervious coverage, but it refers to the base zoning district, then it could apply. But PD 193 is a different kind of animal because it just basically copies and pastes chapter 51, you know, into that PD. So in PD 193 specifically, which is a very uniquely written, structured PD, it won't apply because it doesn't refer to the GR district for all other yard lot and space. It literally spells out how they want all the yard lot and space regulations to work in PD 193. So unfortunately, we won't be able to help out PD 193 with this effort. So you're welcome. All right. That's all I see. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording again. So I'll get these joined together so that it looks like one thing. Thank you.